Here's the paradox of boundaries. You think if you set a boundary that you're risking having people leave you. Like if you're not a doormat, who would even stay around for that? But the truth is, it's a lack of boundaries that causes you to be isolated. This was a revelation to me, and I want to share with you the 4th video in my 4-part series on isolation and loneliness. These videos were so popular. They became the basis for a mini course that I put out that year, and then I expanded it last year into my Connection Boot Camp, and so many people are taking that. That is like a whole 30-day course that gives you a video and a worksheet every day. And if you're interested, you can check it out on my website, crappychildhoodfairy.com, or in the links down below. But I thought that I might remake this series. But this video, just exactly as it is still so true. I'm just sharing it as is, from me to you. Why a lack of boundaries keeps you isolated.
Have you ever been at home and you hear the doorbell and you're pretty sure it's somebody selling something or giving out literature, and instead of answering the door, you hide like on the floor, whispering so they don't know you're there? Have you done this? This is a form of isolating because we don't trust ourselves to have boundaries. And that's the topic of this video in my series on isolation. Isolation is a totally common symptom of childhood PTSD, and a lack of boundaries is a big reason why we get isolated. Now, I know that when I hid on the floor of my kitchen, and I dragged my kids into this too, by the way, we were totally laughing really quietly. And, in the scheme of things, this is pretty unimportant in terms of causing isolation in my life. But a lot of us, when we're isolating, we do the same thing around important things. We ignore texts from friends. We leave early at events where there's likely to be conversation. Or when a friend calls asking if you can give them a ride, you pretend you never got the message. Do you ever do this? Now, I know there are sometimes good self-protecting reasons to just avoid facing certain people. They're dangerous. They've become a total nuisance, and you don't have time right now to face them and deal with disappointing them. But I'm talking about the way that we sometimes choose to isolate, even from people we care about, even from opportunities for work or fun that we used to crave in our lives. And the reason we do it in that moment may seem like a good idea, but when you stand back, it's because the demands on you in that relationship or that work project or that dinner party could, in your mind, go out of control. And a lot of us fear being sucked in or overwhelmed or stuck in a situation where you're miserable. But if you look at it, it would be really hard for somebody else to actually trap you in a situation where you didn't want to be. Being literally trapped in a bad situation was something that used to happen to me when I was a kid, and then I've been physically attacked and held at gunpoint a couple of times. But other than that, I actually had a choice about where I was, who I hung out with, and what I said yes to. And so all the times where I felt pushed or coerced or trapped or miserably obligated were really me not having the inner strength to say no. It was me being afraid what people think of me, or me going on a long path of people-pleasing, a little here, a little there, until I was deeply embedded in some situation I actually resented. I said yes so many times because I couldn't deal with saying no that I didn't even remember how I got there. It begins to seem like other people are doing this to you. So the paradox of learning to say no to people, not through ignoring them, but through responding with a real communicated no, is that it frees us to stay connected. And when we're confident that we can give something a try, we could attend a meeting, we could go on a date or take on a project, and you know that you can still say no the next time or even in the middle of it. When you know that, you absolutely have freedom. When you are in charge of when you say yes and no, isolation is not necessary anymore. You can choose solitude at times, which is healthy and necessary, but you don't have to avoid people altogether. It's okay to say no. It's called boundaries, and people respect you for having boundaries. We all prefer to connect with people who take care of themselves, who are not secretly resentful that they've said yes to us. It doesn't do us a favor, and it doesn't do them a favor. Now, here's a secret about boundaries. They go two ways. A boundary is what you say no to, but it's also saying yes to things that are right for you to say yes to. So let's call the yes ones responsibility boundaries. When a father doesn't support his kids financially, he's breaking a responsibility boundary. And when someone says they'll pick you up at 8 a.m. and they never show up or call, they just broke a responsibility boundary. And notice that the father who doesn't pay, the friend who doesn't show up at your house, they are isolating too. And we can isolate by avoiding saying no, and we can isolate by avoiding saying yes. So childhood PTSD can really do a number on us in our capacity to say yes and no at the right times. Now that discernment begins to heal when we take positive steps toward healing and we get out of the shadows of isolation. And I mean, watch out. If you stay isolated over the years, it will start to bring out the worst in you. It does that to everybody. So recovery means learning this discernment. When you know your own mind, and you can say yes or no politely or really fiercely if necessary, your urge to isolate will get smaller and smaller. And you'll be amazed when you're expressing yourself on these day-to-day things, saying yes and no, how much your life fills up with good people and real connections. If you've got stories about breaking out of isolation or setting boundaries, tell us about them in the comments section.
How can you tell the difference between setting a boundary and just flat out trying to control people? A whole bunch of you responded to a video I made last week that was about subtle ways that supposedly nice people attempt to control you. And a couple of the things I said sparked some comments from people who were either confused or annoyed with me because it appeared to them that I was saying nobody can ever set a boundary or express concern about other people or else they're controlling. So I thought I'd make a follow-up video and just read some of the comments, both thoughtful and critical about this, and respond to it so that we can do a little deeper dive and talk about this, because for people with complex PTSD, that fuzzy line between expressing our boundaries and holding them and control is confusing, and it deserves a little extra time here. So in my post last week, I listed 9 subtle control strategies that people might use against you. And just to call your attention, when somebody's trying to control you. And the first 2, I think, were what set off the kind of alarm bells for some people. One of them is what I call outsourcing responsibility. And that's when somebody tries to make you walk on eggshells and change your behavior and jump through hoops so that they don't get triggered. And doing that instead of kind of, healing and learning to manage their own triggers or not going into situations that they can't stand. The example I gave in that one was a person who doesn't like to be around drinking, getting so upset that other people keep drinking alcohol around them, even though they know that they don't like it. All right, so that was one. The other one that seemed to set off a few comments of that people were bothered was what I call concern shaming. And that's a word I made up for something that I've witnessed where a person actually has a criticism. And because maybe they don't feel like it's fair to criticize, or they don't want to see themselves as somebody who criticizes, they mask it as just being concerned about you. Are you really sure you want to go for that goal? Because that's going to be really hard for you, and how you kind of break down and get fragile around things. All right, so that's like shaming somebody in the name of concern. But as some of you pointed out, there is a time and a place to express concern for people, especially when they're in danger. So let's just get that out on the table. If a person is in danger of harming themselves or other people, who cares if you look controlling? Do whatever you can to stop the bad thing from happening. Now, the fact is, when you have CPTSD, the line is confusing. And I don't know about you, but I've had a lot of alcoholics and addicts in my life. And even though I was going to 12-step programs to get help with how to deal with that in a sane way, because it drives you nuts. It drives you nuts living with somebody who has an addiction. And does tend in many people, including me, to bring out controlling tendencies. You just want to make it stop, and you're just like, gosh, just listen to reason. If you keep doing this, you're going to lose your job. If you keep doing this, I can't be with you. If you keep doing this, and all of this, the control can kind of creep in as a substitute for actually having boundaries. It's a form of a fake boundary, right? Controlling. It's not really a boundary. And I use the example of drugs and alcohol because that's something, and probably many other things are too, and it's debatable, but whether you pressure that person or make threats or ultimatums against them or not, it probably influences very little whether they're going to change. That doesn't mean you can't say it. That doesn't mean you can't express boundaries or preferences or wishes. And that doesn't mean you can't leave them. So the thing I want to say to clarify what is a boundary versus all other, kinds of behaviors that we're talking about, a boundary ultimately is that point where you walk away. You can say, like, if you get drunk, I am going to leave. But the point where you leave is when that boundary becomes real. It's all talk up until that point. It's real when you walk away. And you get to set boundaries. But what I hear in a lot of people with CPTSD, and honestly, especially people who are younger maybe, or newer to recovery, is the belief that this is a right, that I have a right to say, I have a right to make somebody stop drinking. And this is going to sound harsh, but we actually don't have a right to make anybody do anything like that. We have a right to leave, but they have a right to keep drinking. It's almost impossible to influence people in every way that we would like them to. And the thing is, so if we get away from drinking and things that are dangerous, but let's just say we don't like somebody, dressing in a sloppy way or something, something that doesn't endanger anyone, but you don't like it. And you say, I really wish you'd dress in a nicer way. I really wish you would. I don't want to go out with you unless you're going to dress nicely. You can see how this can turn into controlling behavior. If it's really a problem for you, it sort of becomes your problem, right? So that's what this was about, is that continually criticizing somebody and expecting them to change is a form of criticism and control. There is a gray area where when somebody is in danger or when somebody is making a mistake in their life, yes, a good friend may show their good friendship by saying, you know what, I think you're making a mistake. So I wanted to read to you some of the comments that came in. So Melody Lacey said, "We who have PTSD or CPTSD keep hoping that by controlling our environment, we will prevent future attacks." You got it. You've got it, Melody. You've nailed it on the nose. If we could just work hard enough, then things will never go crazy again. And it's hard to know the fine line between teaching and micromanagement. And there it is. Melody, you've laid the foundation for what the dilemma is here. All right. R. May said, "I wouldn't want other people to nag me, but I wouldn't want people in my life to sit back and watch me engage in unhealthy or destructive behavior without saying anything to me or encouraging me to be a better version of myself. This intimate connection and trust are what differentiates my personal relationships with friends and family from those on the periphery and mere passersby on the street." So that is a beautiful example of how somebody who actually has a good relationship could be a positive influence by calling somebody out on something that's a problem. But I just sort of invite everyone to look at that and say, can you imagine how that veers off into strictly criticizing and attempting to control somebody? It is good when a dear friend says something. And I recently had to give a lot of thought to deciding whether to tell somebody very close to me that I thought there was a problem too. I thought something in their behavior was affecting one of their kids. And I got very tangled up about it, actually feeling depressed, like I don't dare say anything, but I feel like I should. And then eventually it came out and I was able to express it. It was a difficult conversation, but in the end it was done lovingly. It was done in a context of offering love and support. And part of why I did this video is because I was worried about this situation, actually. And so I was kind of living this question as I created this video. So that's what that was. All right, Mumu said, "This really hits home. I'm struggling with 2 relationships right now that are triggering me way off the charts. But if I peel back the layers, it's all my own BS that I want them to adjust for. One doesn't remember my triggers, keeps mentioning them, and I feel betrayed. A quiet storm rages inside me. The other is living recklessly and might end up in the psych ward or have their child taken away by the state if they don't slow down." Okay, very serious. "I admit I get unreasonably upset over them with anxiety attacks. I project my regrets and resentments onto them. I'm constantly giving them unsolicited advice. Yikes, who do I think I am that they should do what I say?" Well, Mumu, I think that everything that you said about who do you think you are and where you feel remorseful about giving unsolicited advice, applies to the first friend. But the one who might end up in a psych ward and have their child taken away, I think is a different case, and who you are as a friend. And I think that would be a case where you express concern. And my experience is that if you can do it with utmost love and support, instead of just, you do this, you do that, you suck, I would never be screwed up like you. If you can do it with love, it's a lot more likely to be heard and helpful. I had a family in my life some time back where the kids were, it was looking to me like maybe the kids should be removed. I know a lot of you out there have had this dilemma. What's threatening about that is, A, if the kids are removed and go into a foster care system, is it going to be any better than what they're in right now? But B, if you initiate something like that, as much as it's promised that you can stay anonymous, if the family finds out it was you or even suspects it's you, they will cut off all contact with the kids. And so there's always this dilemma when you're observing kids who might be getting abused. Like, how can you make sure that you're in their life so that you can keep an eye on things? Like, either you have to go all in and get them reported and make that whole machine, lurch into motion, or keep an eye on things. So that's one of the really hard and difficult gray areas of when to express concern about things. So Mumu, I'm just saying to you, I think that having the psych ward, child taken away thing, it's time to express concern. And if that doesn't work, possibly to call authorities, honestly. All right. Tracy said, for those who find it difficult to know when offering advice or suggestions would be appropriate, simply asking, would you mind if I offer advice? Or would you be open to hearing a suggestion? That way you both know where you stand. I'll be honest, when people say that to me, I just totally go, what are they about to say? But I always will say yes. I'll go into fear, but I'll say yes. But I can tell a criticism is coming. Still though, Tracy, I think you're right. Expressing that and showing that respect to say, do you want to hear it, is appropriate. And Tracy goes on to say, most times people assume that advice is what the other person wants or needs without checking in with them first. So for you, it could be a way to connect, but for them, it could be disconnecting, but not truly being seen or heard. And Carla Barron said, there were times when I was engaged in self-destructive behaviors and people called me on it, gently, but they called me on it. I was actually grateful. There were times I was as incredibly self-unaware of how I was coming across, or things that I maybe didn't want to admit to myself but needed to in order to heal. If someone I know cares for me, raises a concern, I don't see that as a form of control. I've had to raise concerns with people I'm close with, and it does come from a place of care. What they do with it is completely up to them, however. Carla Barron, you've got it. There it is. What they do with it is their concern. And again, unless somebody else is in danger here. As someone who has CPTSD, I appreciate the understanding of others. However, no one is obligated to tiptoe around my trauma or my triggers. More so, if my trauma responses victimize other people, then they really don't have to tiptoe. Yes, it's kind to hold a space for others while they're healing. The space still needs to be respected. So yeah, okay, thank you for that. Rachel Fabish said, I found this video really useful and challenging. I have a question. I'm in a new job with a focus on preventing family harm. What are your thoughts on concern shaming around this topic? It's quite normal in this work to encourage people to express their concerns. For example, your kid seems to be afraid of you. That's not okay. Do you need help? Is there a way to interrupt violence and abuse that isn't also controlling? So that's a great question. So first of all, if you're in an organization where the whole point is to prevent family harm, then of course the form it's going to take is in an expression of concern. I would imagine that you guys are in the business of providing supportive environments, creating spaces where people can talk, doing outreach, and when you see something going wrong, saying out loud that you see it and finding the gentlest possible way to go in. That's what I hear you doing. I'm so glad you're there doing that. That's great. So that is your business, all right? That is your business. When I made this video talking about concern shaming, I'm not really talking about professional work. However, since we went there, I just want to say that I think it is possible for people in a professional capacity to use concern shaming. I know that as a kid growing up in a family that had a lot of violence and alcoholism, that on the rare occasion when professionals or adults sort of noticed something was going on and talked to me, No matter what they said, I felt deeply ashamed, and I found it impossible to talk to them or admit that anything was going on. I flat out denied it to everybody, to a doctor, a neighbor who was a psychologist, a neighbor who was a nurse who noticed things, the police who picked me up once when I was out in the snow outside of a casino for many hours. And I was super self-protective and couldn't hear it. I can't say enough how much a feeling of dignity was at stake for me and people noticing that something was wrong. As a child, I really felt like my own worth as a human being was at stake if people saw what was going on. And that's just what kids do. But I think it's also what adults do. And so when you really are concerned about somebody, my rule of thumb is you can start super gentle with them at maybe 20% of the information. You know, if you want to say, rah, 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 say, ah, 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 and it'll often be enough to get the idea across and express the concern and leave a space for people to respond to what you just said. As a person with CPTSD, when I feel scared, when I feel threatened, or upset or strongly about something, I can be very intense. I don't know about you, like not everybody with CPTSD, but it's pretty common, right? I can be very intense. And that's one of the sort of mitigations I've learned is if I feel this big about something, I can express myself like this, and the idea gets across much more effectively. This just sounds like yelling to people, right? Or it is yelling. All right. Written piece of paper said, "Please help. How do I know the difference between me being controlling and me setting boundaries? I added someone as an authorized user to my credit card. They almost maxed it out. I tried setting a repayment schedule, but they're calling me controlling. Am I?" All right. I'm so glad you asked this one. Because no, you're not controlling enough. That's what's going on. Not control. There's no boundary here. And there's not enough details here, but I'm assuming this is maybe a boyfriend or girlfriend or a family member who you chose to believe could be trusted with your credit card. So adding them as an authorized user of your card is putting your trust in them that they're going to spend an appropriate amount. And I don't know if you gave them a dollar limit or an expectation of paying you back or how to pay you back or how often or a payment plan, but it sounds like from what you said that either they ignored what you set up or it was never communicated to them. And either way, I'm sensing here a real difficulty setting boundaries, that this may have been like more idealized thinking that somebody could handle it and they couldn't. And now they've almost maxed out your card. So the first thing, can I give you unsolicited advice? Maybe like cut them off from the card. This is not good. Keeping that card open isn't going to cause you to get paid back or anything. And I kind of would be surprised if you get paid back if they disrespected the other boundary. It's not controlling. That is your money and your card. So that is not inappropriate for you to control. I totally sympathize though. You wouldn't be on this channel, I think, if you didn't have CPTSD and that abuse and neglect in your childhood hadn't like muddied the water for you about like, can I share my credit card with somebody and expect them to honor me? With this person, no, it turns out. This may be an expensive live and learn opportunity here, where you start to learn that if you're going to share money with somebody, there needs to be a much clearer agreement between you. But anyway, I really do hope you get paid back. I hope you use this as an opportunity to step up strong and set your expectations with this and do your best to save the relationship. Money problems, huh? You know what's funny about money? Like, not having money certainly brings up a lot of stress, but funnily enough, people who have money also seem to go into a lot of stress about money. So a lot of it has to do with the way we share money with other people. So I hope you get this worked out and to a good mutual agreement, and that you get paid back, and that after this, you feel more empowered to set your boundaries about this, about limits and payment. All right. So Destroy Raiden said, this one's kind of a snarky comment. So all concern is bad. All asking someone about where they're going or what they'll be doing is bad. Asking them to stop doing things that trigger and hurt you is bad. So I can see this email is getting very global here. It's about all things, and Destroy Raiden probably knows really well. Of course, I didn't say all things are bad, but I'll read on. It just feels like you're supposed to be detached from your loved ones until they decide to tell you something. And it cuts off bonding entirely, as you can't ask about anything in their life or suggest they do something or help themselves. So why should they ask about you or care to suggest things to you? And it also feels like you're saying you can't tell them how their actions are triggering and harming you to set up a boundary, or don't do that. Destroy Raiden, what you're saying right here, it just sounds so much like my mind when I'm in distress about people. I think you've just articulated perfectly the confusion about, like, what can I say? What can I reasonably expect? Why don't people care about me? All that stuff. What you're describing, I'm not sure if that's where you meant to go, but I'm feeling you, okay? So I hear you about how painful it is when no matter how much you ask people what you need, and to respect boundaries, like desperately needing some boundaries around your privacy or your basic needs, and they're just tromping all over them. I had an older brother. He died when he was 38. I was 31 from drugs and alcohol. But the whole time he lived, he was a boundary crusher. I was anxious all the time that he was, if he got in touch with me, I would become anxious. If he knocked on the door, I often wouldn't let him in. I just, I had a really hard time like holding the boundary on him. He had spent his whole life. He was the one who tortured me. He used to steal my little babysitting money, all my little dollars. I would hide them under my mattress and he would find them. He would read my journal. So I had trouble keeping boundaries with my brother. So I know how fraught it gets. And so sometimes not being able to maintain your boundaries does develop this kind of compensation thing of controlling. Now, whatever I had to do to control my brother's behavior, I basically consider legitimate, to keep him out of my life or to keep him from, completely wrecking things in some social situation that he might enter into when he was drinking or using. But there are many other relationships where that same controlling behavior carried over, and it wasn't appropriate. And when we get controlling, we push people away. Now, when I made this video last week, I focused on when people do it to you, and it feels yucky. And a lot of people, I'm so proud of you for this, really. A lot of people self-reflected and said, you know what, I do that. I do that, and I do too. I do the controlling behaviors. I have them done to me. And the more I am in touch with how much I don't like it when people do this to me, the more I'm able to stop doing it to other people. So as I heal from CPTSD, it's more and more rare that I have people who are total boundary crushers in my life. It still happens, but it's not the huge problem overwhelming my life that it used to be. That gradually changes with healing. And so likewise, my need to control isn't getting all mixed up with situations that are actually dangerous or anything. And I have the luxury of really looking at, when am I asking people to observe a boundary, and when am I crossing the line into controlling them? There's just like a line that's crossed, and it's never going to have a neon sign around it so you know when you're crossing the line. So you're going to have to be tuned into the situation. You're going to have to be tuned in, reading other people about it. One thing I use is a rule of 3. My husband takes off his shoes and leaves them on the side of the bed where I get into the bed, and when I get up in the middle of the night, I trip over his shoes. So I say, you move your shoes, don't put them by the bed. I trip over them in the middle of the night. And sometimes it happens after I've already gone to bed, so I don't know they're there, right? And he says, yes, of course I'll do that. Well, guess what? He forgets, and the shoes are there. I've probably asked him 10 times. 10 times is too many. Rule of 3. Ask 3 times. If they still can't or won't do it yourself. Now, these shoes are not anything I would ever even consider leaving my cool husband for. But I don't like it. I've gotten testy with him about it. And you know what I do? When I come to bed, I move the shoes myself. And when I wake up in the middle of the night and I need to get up, I just remember now I walk gingerly. And if there's shoes there, I kick them out of the way and continue to walk. And I just handle it. For something of that size, it's not worth getting into continuous criticism with him or to argue about. It's just something that's worth adjusting. And I won't do it, but I could list a dozen things around the house. I happen to like, with jars and Tupperware, I want them put away with the top on. Nobody in my family really thinks that's important, and it just drives me insane. And it's time for me to stop complaining about it. All right. So that's something, those are nice, easy examples of where I can ask for something I want, But at a certain point, to continue asking when I can't get it is controlling behavior. And if I want to just stick around, and I do, I love my family, I'm going to have to find another way to deal with it. See, I just feel like you should be able to go into the cupboard and get a Tupperware thing with the top and not have to dig around for something that matches for 5 minutes. I don't like that. And honestly, because I'm dysregulated, I get very dysregulated. It helps me to have things kind of orderly like that. It helps me and helps me conserve focus and patience, and peace inside to be able to have that. On the other hand, having arguments and being all resentful about it sabotages my peace of mind. So I weigh it up and I go, oh gosh, I'll just get the freaking top and put it on here. And every once in a while I sit down on the floor and I go into the cupboard and I put tops on everything. And there's always a few things that have lost their tops and I chuck those. That's how I do it. All right. That's my happiness solution. You thought it was magic. No, it's just practical. So I hope that helps to clarify both the when there's in danger, when someone's in danger, don't worry about looking controlling, just do the right thing. When something's really trivial, see if you can solve the problem yourself and try to be thoughtful about that middle ground that's kind of gray, about where you want to express your boundaries or express your concern to somebody without overstepping, and how you can do that. So much of recovery is about learning to express ourselves. In order to become our real selves, we must express ourselves, right? So the path of recovery is always going to involve this sort of experimentation where you do express yourself and you get a response or a reaction, and sometimes you get cooperation and sometimes you get conflict, and you begin to learn what happened. Now, if you're like me, getting into conflict is very, very dysregulating. And that's why I teach the daily practice. That's the free course. I put it under every video I make. It's free. You can learn these techniques in less than an hour, but they can help to unpack the stress of being in conflict with people, or to be confused, or to not know the right thing. You have a place to put those thoughts and take a rest from them. And my experience is that having used these techniques, you come out of that, of the writing and the meditation, just a little bit clearer about what the next step is, about what is the situation, what ought I to do about it? Have I been wronged? Have I done something wrong? Finally, there's a way to get some clarity about that, and it helps tremendously. And these are techniques I recommend doing twice a day. If past trauma has made it hard for you to see red flags when they're waving at you, then the first time that you set boundaries for yourself and stick up for what you really want is going to feel really intense. And even though most of us who were abused or neglected as kids don't start learning this until well into adulthood, I call this the early phase of speaking up, the adolescent phase of healing, by the way. When you start saying no, it'll come out like, no, no way, I said no. Even on small questions like, do you want cream in your coffee? So everything comes out like big, oversized, and strong, and that's okay. Even if it's too much, it's okay. It's going to come back to size pretty soon through practice. And then there's this normal phase of healing where you spoke up for yourself and you set your boundaries, and then doubt creeps in and you get a little bit confused. And this is why it's so important that we don't try to heal alone, because it's this backlash period after you've moved forward in your healing when you can be most vulnerable to giving up, to losing your boundaries. So my letter today is from a woman I'll call Denise, and she wrote to me with a question, but also a success story, and I wanted to share that. She's been watching my videos and following my healing program for a while now, and so a lot of progress is happening for her. So she writes, Dear Fairy, my childhood, while stable in my early years, had a lot of neglect and abandonment, but no violence or sexual abuse. I've got the pencil here to circle things I want to come back to, but first, the success story. My childhood, while stable in my early years, had a lot of neglect and abandonment, but no violence or sexual abuse. My mother died when I was 10. My father was kind but not perceptive or protective, and he remarried twice to unstable and difficult women who elbowed my sister and me out in a variety of ways, and to whom he deferred. Fortunately, I had the loving care of an aunt in another country and was able to go to boarding school by the age of 15, which, while I hated it at the time, provided protection for me from the stepmother and her chaotic household. Funny how spirit comes to help, don't you think, she says? So the topic that closely applies to me is a decades-long pattern of being attracted to unavailable men. I've been divorced for a couple of decades after a 10-year marriage. I bowed out of dating about 6 years ago, partly to develop the talents I have, partly out of resignation, and partly to try to heal this tendency. Last week, the pattern reared its head again. An intelligent and cultured man that I met at a dinner party months ago subsequently emailed me a flattering note. I responded cordially but cautiously because I had registered that he was wearing a wedding ring. In the past few months, a few emails were exchanged, short, friendly, no invitation included, and not flirty after the first one, which was flirty. And frankly, I wasn't sure what he was up to, but I knew enough to keep my distance. Then very recently, he extended an invitation to a daytime event. I asked him to explain the wedding ring to me. I promptly received a long, candid, and complete explanation. He's separated from his wife, separate bedrooms. Oh, separate bedrooms, not separated. Interesting word choice there. But lives in the same house, and because of a chronic illness, she is dependent on his insurance. He wrote that he was only offering a friendship. This offer was actually mixed in with some flattery and by mentioning the possibility of a spark. Let me add right now that I think he's very likely a good person. He's in a tough situation and naturally wants someone nice to spend time with. And he may be a bit unaware of the depth of his own attachment to his wife since he hasn't managed to remove his wedding ring. Even though his wife did so years ago. She says he's perhaps a bit naive, which dating will rectify once or if he gets out of there. But this does not make him a bad person. Perhaps you have something to say about this, but let me give you the rest of the story. I do have things to say about it, but yes, let's get the rest of the story. Okay. She says, here's where you come in. I bulleted in my mind the essence of your message. So she's quoting me here, which I find it charming. She says, he's married, which means unavailable, which means morally questionable at best, which means bad news for Denise. Yes, you've got me right. Also, his note was flirty, but the offer was friendship. Mixed messages. Bad news for Denise. My tendency to feel I have to make everyone happy by meeting their needs. Character flaw, or CPTSD, or both. What do you think? Hooked by my own stuff. Bad news for Denise. She says me, I say Denise. She's not talking about herself in the third person, just so you know. Okay. But, she says, here's what I wrote to him once I learned his status. There is no situation in which I will get involved with a married man or any man enmeshed with another woman, married or not. The rest of my note was kind but clear. If not for you, she's saying to me, I would not have found the courage or words to set such firm boundaries. So immediately, with definite language to boot. So suddenly I felt powerful and free. Yay. I felt respect for myself. Yay. But, she says, woe is me, it was not 100%. I agreed to meet him on the basis of friends only. You know what I'm going to say about that, friends. Yeah. Okay. And then I went into a huge spin, well beyond what the event merited. Knots in my stomach, anxiety, obsessive internal conversations, the whole agonizing shebang. This, even though I hardly thought about him before and had no interest other than abstractly, meaning I'd like a man in my life, but not necessarily him. Ooh, physical signals. Okay. Thanks to your videos and courses, I did the daily practice and I reached out to friends who could offer me perspective. All 6 of them, good job, they all said, including one male, unequivocally, no, do not meet this man or try to develop a friendship. The male friend said it would be like crack cocaine for me. And he was so right. In the deeper recesses of my heart, I am quite hungry for emotional and physical intimacy, would love someone to know and see me, would love someone to dote on and share a life. A little attention goes a long way when you feel this way. So I canceled within 24 hours of agreeing to meet him. Okay, good. And then the backlash came. I felt guilty. I felt unkind, too harsh. Maybe we could be friends. Maybe I'm a bad person. Maybe I'm inflexible. Maybe his friend, our connection, would think badly of me. Maybe he will think badly of me. Maybe I should just try. Maybe. This is such a good description of the voice of trauma inside. I love it. You've said it so well. By the way, he didn't take no for an answer and attempted to persuade me, not too much, 2 texts that I did not read. Thank goodness. 2 days later, the torment is gone. I have a residual emotional hangover, as if having navigated the high seas of a serious storm. Yes. My adrenals are exhausted, but my stomach is at peace, and I slept well last night. The obsession has dissipated. And you're much closer to finding true love, I might add, not being wrapped up with this go-nowhere guy. Okay. If you have the time and are inspired, she said, I'd love for you to address the hangover part and the storm over so little. Am I wacko? No, you're not. I will likely mull over this a bit, but not mull over him, since I only met him once, and I will dread running into him, though this is not likely. All right, Denise, good job. You did it. You did it, and you have perfectly described what it's like in the early phases of healing to set a boundary. And you know what you did? You set a boundary with truth. You asked the right questions, you got answers, you responded to those answers, instead of what so many of us have done. You've probably done it. You just pretend you didn't see the ring. You pretend you didn't hear the answer about the wife. You go along with some explanation. And I would just say, you know, when you said I might have something to say about it, separated from a spouse does not mean separate bedrooms. Lots of people have separate bedrooms. They do that because of snoring or whatever. We often do that in my household. We are not separated. We are very much married. Wearing a wedding ring is a way to signal to the world that he is married and with somebody. And personally, I do not trust his honesty in this situation, trying to present himself as somebody who only wears a wedding ring and lives with his wife so she can have insurance. That's not necessary. I mean, I think he would have to stay married to her to be able to share that insurance. I don't know. But even if that were the case, I'm just going to say, Denise, when you write down, you've taken the dating course, I think, and I always have everybody start, write down what you really want. Write down the deal breakers. And one deal breaker for you, I'm going to suggest is, you know, cannot be living in a house with somebody who is married to him. Sorry, I'm just laughing because I know you're with me on this. It's just like, yeah, there it is. No, a big no way on this one. I think he was lying. I think he was minimizing the level of his attachment. You say he may be a bit unaware. And this is where the part of your trauma that's trying to make you feel guilty can only feel guilty because it hasn't let you actually come out of denial about this. He is wholly aware, I assure you, that he's married and lives with his wife. And I just wonder how his wife would feel about his shenanigans if she knew. So I don't doubt that they have a terrible marriage, but I never want for you or anybody in our beautiful community of tender hearts who are healing and, you know, rising up to be ready to love and be loved, that they should ever be with somebody who's compromised in this way, not dishonest, not shady, not half involved with somebody else. Did you guys see the comment the other day? Somebody came in and, forget the word, mono something or other, that I was like biased towards monogamy and not polyamory, and then put period and then disappointing. And I was joking with him that I would love to have a t-shirt that said that about me, that I'm biased for monogamy and I'm disappointing. And you're disappointing too. And let's all be disappointing to all the people who want us to just do whatever with them in their whatever relationship. We're not available. We're trying to have the relationship that we want. Okay. So I really want that for you. You setting that boundary, that free, powerful feeling you felt. Yes, that's what it's like. Like, you think it's going to hurt so much. You think it's going to just like bring on this avalanche of loneliness, but it doesn't. It brings on freedom and a feeling of like power entering into you. Like the wind is in your sails now when you can start to set boundaries against crap. You know, that was just crap. So good job on that. So then, yes, the hangover, the backlash from inside, like, hold on, wait a minute. So it's so normal to be like, oh, I'm afraid I can't really hold this boundary. I don't dare, because basically we're afraid we're going to be alone forever. That's everybody's core fear. So if you have that fear, just keep writing it. It's just always there. It's part of being human. And the one thing that will keep you out of a relationship forever is emotional entanglement with unavailable people. So the fact that you've pulled yourself out of this entanglement, you know, really very positive step towards love. Good job. But what you noticed is that it feels like you've navigated the high seas on a storm and your adrenals are exhausted. And there it is. The triggered trauma response to getting manipulated, tricked, deceived, seduced, have your boundaries violated where he comes back again for more and you had to set the boundary again, and the fear involved in setting the boundary. This is a physiological thing you're doing here. Physiologically, we've been trapped in that fear of abandonment, and physiologically, we've been compelled to attach to people who were no good. These are all physiological phenomena. Physiologically, neurologically, we were damaged by trauma in the first place. So you bet it's physical. I've said before that sometimes when I know that I'm about to blow, I'm about to go into an emotional flashback, I can feel it creeping down my arms. But what that is, it's a chemical release in my bloodstream. Oh my gosh, it's real. So yeah, there's a hangover. There's a hangover. And so that it's a lot of stress on the body going through all of that, but you came right back out of it. So this is a good time to treat yourself like you did just have a crisis. Drink a lot of water, exercise, don't do alcohol and sugar right now. Treat yourself like something toxic has flown through you. Get your rest, move around, and get lots of love from your friends. I just like the fact that you have 6 friends to go to. You've got to be a member. If you're in our membership program, there's people you can call for each of these things, and people you put it out there, and there's a lot of support. And I really, really support everyone to find that kind of support for themselves, whether it's with us or a 12-step group or a counseling group or wherever you can find it. I know that for people with CPTSD, that circle of friends is one of the things that we usually have lost. Then came the pandemic and made it worse. Prioritize that, everybody. Have a group of friends who you can go to and be like, I feel like I'm going to call them. I feel like I'm going to cave. And they can go, no, Denise, no, don't do it. We love you. You're great. You're beautiful. You're good. We all need that. We need those friends. All right. So great work, Denise. I can't wait to hear what comes next. You've just taken a huge step forward, and I'm proud of you. When you're going through life with a big abandonment wound in your heart, it can be so painful to lose a relationship that you will do anything, you'll put up with anything, rationalize anything, believe anything to find a way to explain to yourself why someone leaving isn't really leaving. You think to yourself, oh, it's a mental health problem. It's a mistake. And this kind of thinking is so common for people who were left as children. Either your parent physically left you, or they left you emotionally because they were addicted, or they had alcoholism, or they were depressed, or they were caught up in their own difficulties so much that they couldn't really see and hear you and feel the reality of your precious child self and what you needed. So you got good at tolerating that. And this is a big way that trauma gets passed from generation to generation, by the way. So I got a letter this week from someone I'll call Frank, and he writes, this is kind of a long letter. I'm sharing it with you. There were 3 stages. I had to keep asking questions, and it's interesting how the information unfolds. So I'm going to share it all with you. Frank writes, Dear Fairy, I myself definitely have some CPTSD issues. I had an alcoholic mother, and as an adult have been a definite rescuer. Circling here with my pencil. A crisis in my marriage has brought my attention to these issues. So I'll circle things that I want to come back to after we just read through it. We're going to read through it one time, and I'll see if I can help you, Frank. My wife had a way worse childhood. She has left to chase a limerent object. That's a person who someone is limerent over, kind of obsessed in a fantasy realm, but not a real realm. She has left to chase a limerent object and moved in with him. She won't initiate divorce, and she's told her good friend that she hopes one day maybe we can work it out. In reality, the only thing stopping that is she won't stop. I think she's heavily caught in the fantasy. Do I continue to wait? Am I just acting out my own childhood by sticking around waiting for her to return? We have 4 kids, and I hate to divorce and formally break up the family. But is that the wake-up call she needs to shake her from the fantasy? I don't want to be a slave to my own trauma, but I can't seem to just really be done with the relationship. I've already waited 6 months. So I asked Frank, I said, well, tell me more. This is intriguing, but I need to know more. Where are your kids? And what does your wife say about the possibility of return? So he says there's 4 kids. They're now splitting custody 50-50. And yes, unfortunately, he says, this man has taken a role in the kid's life. We went to a marriage workshop at the beginning of the year designed for marriages in this scenario, and they actually teach about limerence, so it's where I first learned about it. They teach that while your spouse is limerent, they're not going to be rational at all, that in addition to this, what they're doing likely goes against all their values. This being the case, they find themselves in major cognitive dissonance and become very confused. This has been her to a T. When you ask her, it is a lot of, I don't know, which from my coaching with the previous organization is very common. They also tend to vilify the spouse, me, to justify their actions, which she did badly in the beginning. She also has complained about just following her heart, but not knowing what her values really are anymore. I've noticed you mentioned it's very common with CPTSD, but it's common in limerence because they're trying to justify their actions due to the immense amount of cognitive dissonance they're in. When I kind of pushed for divorce, she was willing to acquiesce, but I pushed her specifically wanting to know what she thought because she has accused me all these years of doing whatever I wanted, and she knew she didn't make her voice heard. So I pushed back and asked what she wanted. She said she didn't want to string me along, but that she's on a journey right now and feels like she needs to see it through. So cryptically, she's saying, I wish you'd hold on. She's made some efforts to establish more of a friendship with me. Considering a few months ago, she said I was a monster that was controlling and, quote, abusive. It is a large about face. So there are small signs that she's warming up a little. Another is that she had agreed to participate in a Bible study with an old friend, long distance, and she's even recently told me she started reading her Bible again and praying more. We used to be pretty strong in our faith, and during and before this, we both had kind of walked away. At the same time, she's not taking discernible and credible actions to repair our relationship. She continues to live most of her life as though there is no thought of returning. There are times I feel like she is simply having her cake and eating it too, keeping me on the back burner. This isn't who I've known my wife to be all these years. At the same time, none of this is. My wife used to be the most rigid and planned out person. In fact, her hobby is decorating happy planners with stickers and stuff. Yet when asked about the future, she says, I don't really have a plan, but I think that's kind of the point for me to figure it out as I go. It's tough because this organization educates that limerence will eventually end. They'll come out of the fog and may realize what a mess they've made of their life. And I think you've done the best I've seen at describing the fantasy that limerence is, the drug that it is. My wife never wanted to be like the addicts in her family. Sadly, she is hooked on the guy, and you can tell she's falling apart. I love my family. I love my kids. I never wanted them to have a broken home. Yeah. I'm someone that is committed to being the best person I can be. I struggle immensely because I don't want to let my kids down. They miss their mom, even though they see her half the time. My wife used to stay at home and even homeschool the kids, so it's a major hole in their life. At the same time, I don't want to just be a mindless slave to my past and cling to a dead relationship. So I wrote to Frank again at that point because what had caught my ear is that she said she accused him of being abusive. And I'm like, why does she say that? So he gave me a little more background. He said, we've been together 15 years, married for 12. We've 4 kids. And she has most of her life been a stay-at-home mom and even homeschooled the kids. When we were first married, you see, it's sort of like unfolding, isn't it? When we were first married, during our first year, she became very depressed and abused some of her prescription pills and actually had an affair that was limited to a couple of times. She came clean with me pretty early on, and I forgave her, chalking it up to her deep depression and young foolish behavior. After that, she threw herself into our faith and became an excellent mother. She cared for our kids and was probably, looking back, terribly self-sacrificial, never knowing when to stop or when to indulge in self-care. We also struggled financially many years, and so life has been stressful without a doubt. Fast forward to about a year ago, and we both, due to COVID, had stopped being active in our faith. She expressed concern and wanted me to take our faith more seriously. She warned me that she feared, without it, things would fall apart. I didn't realize how dependent she was on it for a sense of values and purpose. Shortly thereafter, we made a regretful decision to experiment in our marriage with a threesome, and this is how she met this other guy. This came out rather late in the letter writing process. We were in such a great place at that time that I wasn't threatened in the least. By the time I realized how bad it was too late, and she was in the grips of limerence. Earlier this year, she moved out of our home. She lives with the guy. They got together. We split custody. By all accounts, this guy is not exactly a better choice, but she says her relationship is different with him, and they work well together. He's the complete opposite of me in many ways, and I know he, too, has a porn addiction. 2? Okay. It feels as if there are two addicts together having their own way. She's pretty depressed, suffering from an increased number of panic attacks, and has taken up smoking as well as gained quite a bit of weight. She's very vague about the future and doesn't push for divorce. For now, she's living each day for herself. She won't discuss our relationship with me and is full of more I don't know, which I'm told can be her cognitive dissonance. I want to save my family, but I fear I'm simply acting out of my pattern of saving my alcoholic mother as a child by waiting around for my wife. This whole thing has brought to light that we both had a pretty codependent relationship with each other, and I've worked on myself the last 6 months to fix these problems. I love my wife dearly, but she has hurt me considerably. I know forgiveness is possible. Trust can be rebuilt, but am I just hanging on because it's what love is to me? Am I just fitting myself to crap? What's the healthy thing to do? I'm honestly confused, and I keep going back and forth. I hate the idea of not having my kids full-time, separate holidays, etc., but is it inevitable? And then I asked Frank what he thought was hard for her. Why did she say she left? And he said, I would say the controlling and abusive aspect of the relationship that she refers to were mostly in light of codependency. As the ways you'd expect a rescuing partner who kind of takes on a parental role in a relationship. I was overly critical and not empathic enough, and I would say to some of her issues through the years, they were all more covert issues of control, and some was likely backed up by my super conservative religious background. The husband is head of the household and that whole thing. This was amplified by the fact that she is super avoidant, which I didn't know. So any issues she had through the years, she never spoke up about. I've felt to always be a person that if you confront me, I'm willing to consider change. I look back, though, and I realize I have definitely been super defensive and would often blame shift issues in the past, too. I really struggled at needing to be right about many things. I'm sure it made her feel crazy at times. Okay? Likewise, I'd say for many years I felt super manipulated. My brother-in-law, who lived with us for several years, told me he felt like my wife would often play the victim and pout until she got her way. So I feel like we both had our super unhealthy ways of getting what we wanted. But by and large, I thought we were pretty happy. There was never physical abuse and never anything really purposely done to hurt each other. It was more just shitty communication patterns and stuff from our families of origin, really. In a nutshell, I can see that I've been overly focused on myself through these years and should have been more insistent on taking in her perspective and at times deferring to her to make a decision, even if she was reluctant. I definitely have carried over really toxic communication strategies from my childhood, too, that I've worked to untangle. I use things like nonviolent communication, which is a technique to better handle conflict. I've allowed my emotional dysregulation to run the show for many years and made many life decisions based far more on these emotions that are from a really crappy framework. This has caused me to constantly change my mind, be difficult to criticize, and often selfish. I so related to having no emotions during really bad times, and so I'd lack proper empathy and support. I have read several books on codependency and have worked to stop being the fixer and advice giver in life. I've dramatically reduced the behaviors in the last 6 months. I have attended CODA and my own therapy. I've apologized for anything and everything I recognize I've done, perhaps too much, and I've asked for forgiveness. I've accepted my lack of control and ability to only change myself and have reacquainted myself with my faith in a much healthier and less judgmental manner. Can you help? Frank. Okay. Frank, my goodness, this is a really tough situation. I read this whole letter with all the parts of it because I think it's such a strong example of how complicated life can be, how there's no easy answer, how we suffer through these things because we're human. But I'm going to try. Let's see if I can help shed some insight for you. So you wrote, you had an alcoholic mother. I did too, and I just relate to that. You've been a definite rescuer. And you really, the crisis in your marriage has brought that out. Your wife had an even worse thing. You mentioned she had addicts in her family. And she has left you for what you call a limerent object and moved in with him. And she won't initiate divorce. And she's told her friend that she hopes it might work out. And you were wondering, do I continue to wait? Now, this is interesting. I expect in the comments we're going to have two camps. And one's going to say, stick it out. And one's going to say, leave. And the reason we're going to see that is because it's a very complicated situation and it doesn't have an easy answer. I normally don't comment on the person who didn't write in, but I feel like I have a sense of what could be going on with her, so I'll be commenting on that a little bit. So you're splitting custody 50-50. You went to a marriage workshop at the beginning of the year when this whole thing first started, when she, I guess, first got limerent, and it was about limerence, and she agreed that's what was going on. They said, don't make rash decisions. She did anyway. She moved out to live with this guy. So it was interesting because the first letter I got from you was very short, and somehow I detected like there's this brewing storm here, but you hadn't said what it is. And I don't know, I cannot kind of understand that. I'm really used to, as a person with trauma and drama in my life, I compartmentalized it. I didn't want everybody to see it, but I thought it was just kind of interesting when you wrote to me how much important detail was left out. And maybe you just needed to be asked. So I asked. We had several rounds of communication. And your answers made sense to me, but they all came as a surprise because it didn't. I was like, oh, that explains a lot. So, yeah, somebody who's limerent is not going to be rational. They will be in cognitive dissonance. They'll be confused. They'll blame you for what's going on. That all sounds about right. It's really trippy that she went to that workshop with you. So interesting that there is such a thing. And she went, but it just doesn't sound like her heart was in it. But she tried, or she was willing to go through the motions of trying. The feeling I get about her is that she's been doing that all her life, that has not been able to develop an identity or what she wants. I think that might be what's going on. And then when you ask her, she says a lot of, I don't know, I just don't know. And you were told that could be her cognitive dissonance. And that's just a funny way for saying, yeah, she doesn't know. She's unclear what she's feeling or doing. She just finds herself running away from home. Her actions speak louder than what her intentions are expressed to be. But also, keep in mind, she's trying not to hurt you. She probably has a horror of hurting you and how she's let you down and how it's affecting the kids. So she is probably putting the lightest spin on this possible. That doesn't mean I can read her mind. But just normally that's what a person does unless they really want to hurt you. And I'm not hearing that was the case for either of you. But you said when I kind of pushed her for divorce, and I get it, you maybe tried to force a decision like, what is this? Are we getting divorced or are we getting back together? I need to know one way or the other. Very fair. Okay. Even if she couldn't say anything. And she said, you specifically wanted to know what she thought because she kept saying, I never got to weigh in. My feelings were never considered in all of this. So you were like, come on, let me know how you feel. I do want to know. And I'm proud of you that you were able to change that about the dynamic where you really kept opening up the space for her to say how she felt. It didn't get the answer you wanted, but you did it. And that's really good. That's a really good thing. She didn't want to string me along. She's on a journey right now, and it feels like she needs to see it through. So cryptically, you said, she's saying, I wish you'd hold on. Okay, so the key sign of limerence is that somebody is looking for signs. And so this is the interesting thing, Frank. I think you're in a bit of limerence. I don't think she is, and you know why? Because she's actually living with the guy. She may be in I don't know. I agree she's in kind of an altered state of some kind of trying to, we'll talk about her in a minute because it is speculation. But I just think that you looking for signs that what she really wants is to come back. It feels a little bit like you're looking at signs. You say later that none of her actions support, credible, consistent and credible action towards getting back together. When somebody has strayed and they want to get back together, what they would do if they were sincere about it is anything they had to do. They would just keep showing up. They would do everything that you've been doing. They would take the classes, read the books, see the therapist, try to come up with what was my part in it? What can I heal in myself? You've done an amazing job of that. I don't hear that she's doing that. I hear she's in a flight mode. She's running away. And just because it reflects a internal struggle or a trauma reaction, it doesn't mean it's not real. She really has run away. And that's the sad thing about this. You can't really explain that fact away with her trauma or limerence or anything. But the thing about limerence is once you're actually with somebody, limerence goes away because you're living with them. You can't really have a fantasy that everything would be great. What I've noticed is that people who are limerent, like limerence, we're vulnerable to it if we were terribly neglected as kids and our lives suck. So I think that may have been what was happening with her. Her life was feeling empty. She had a terrible childhood. So a fantasy relationship where you just think, if we were together, oh my gosh, it would just be so amazing. Actually being together with anybody totally kills that. You go, whoa, what a disappointment, right? It's not like the fantasy. And a lot of people will avoid actual relationships with the person they're limerent over, at least on a subconscious level, because they know that real life would kill the fantasy that's keeping them going. But what that fantasy is doing is allowing a person to avoid the pain of their life and the difficult decisions they have to face. So whatever this is coming from, whatever you want to call it, she's being a terrible partner to you. She's just being a terrible partner to you. There's no answers. What she is to herself is one thing. What she is to you is another. What I hear you doing is abandoning yourself and hopping the fence and trying to figure her out, trying to excuse her actions, trying to create a bridge for her. And I don't blame you. Having 4 kids together is a serious thing. And of course you want to save the marriage. And I don't blame you for trying. But I would just say, I see you did do a lot of work on yourself. But I'm going to recommend to you, Frank, that you really get self-disciplined about focusing on your own side and not trying to make her see anything, not try to figure her out, not try to make her come back. Like, if she's going to do that, she will let you know. She will let you know. You don't have to do a thing. You can start focusing on your life and following the split custody agreement. I have a little concern about that. As a, previously single mom before, one thing that I noticed is that when you're separated but not divorced, you have one set of rights as a parent. When you're actually divorced, you have a different set. And when you're divorced, for example, and this is in my state, I don't know if it's absolutely true for everybody in the world here, when you're divorced, your spouse cannot take kids out of the country without your consent. So if there was any concern that she would run off with the kids or anything like that, I mean, it sounds like she's not in a position to, but just going to say, I would recommend you at least speak to a lawyer about this and find out about implications for parenting, money, spousal support, and all that. And not try to do this all emotionally. I think divorce is certainly like a possibility right now. And you knowing the facts does nothing but helps you make a clear, a better decision for yourself, whether it's for or against divorce. I would not condemn you if you decided to wait longer on this one. It sounds like a crazy situation. What's the hurry? But I would like you and your kids to be legally protected for crazy shenanigans that might arise, because I don't know much about these other people, but it sounds not great. It doesn't sound great. I think it's really sad because the kids need contact with both of you. You're doing a great job at it. I know how half custody is not the same, but there are things you can do to make that as good as possible. But this was interesting, Frank. You said when you kind of push for divorce, and you pushed her wanting to know her opinion, she pushed back and she said she's on a journey, she needs to see it through. You thought she was cryptically saying, I want to come back. Maybe, but I don't think so. She's made some efforts to establish more of a friendship, which is good because you're co-parenting. And a few months ago, she thought you were a monster, you were controlling and abusive. And she's come around on that, so good. I think that it's a lot easier to deal with a bad dynamic when you're outside of it. So whatever pressure she felt in the relationship, even though she may have jumped out of the fire out of the frying pan and into the fire, at least she's out of the frying pan and she can see the frying pan, and maybe she's feeling less angry at you, and she's warming up a little bit. But another thing is that she's agreed to participate in a Bible study with an old friend, long distance. Yeah, that's secondhand knowledge or something. It's also long distance. It's an old friend. Maybe, sometimes if she has a pang of guilt or she wants to placate you, you said that you had a codependent two-way dynamic. That's the sort of thing she would say. Well, I'm looking, when I would guess you've probably said to her, but don't you realize this is morally wrong? And she'd be like, yeah, well, I'm going to a Bible study. I swear I'm going to do it. I'm going to do that. That just sounds like that kind of thing. Believe it when you see it, and don't even worry about what it is, because what matters is what she actually does, and what she's doing is staying with this other guy and not coming home. So this thing where you guys lost your faith, I just have so much compassion for you. Yeah, so that you kind of walked away from faith. And I think that's been happening for a lot of people, especially with the pandemic. And at the same time, she's not taking discernible and credible actions to repair. So there you have it. She continues to live most of her life as though there's no thought of returning. There's your sign if you want to look for signs. She's not acting like somebody who's returning. And that's really significant. You can let go, Frank. You know what? You can let go. You can stop trying to make anything happen. And if she does have it in her that she wants to come back and work it out with you, she's a lot more likely to do it when that space is just a nice neutral field without you hanging there waiting for her like, are you coming back? Are you coming back? Because it is like so clear. She was not able to be herself before. She was feeling pressured. She needs pressure off. Let her out. Just let her out. It won't do any harm. She's already gone. You know, as a human being, and as your friend and as the mother of your kids, it just sounds like she's very lost right now. And she keeps saying the point of her doing this is, I don't have a plan. I'm trying to figure it out. You said she had this hobby. She had homeschooled the kids. She didn't work, and that tells me she has no source of income. I don't know about this guy, but she doesn't have a way to get some space without a guy because she has no money. I'm guessing you guys had financial problems. She doesn't work. That's a terrible position for a person to be in. And, you know, we've seen other letters like this. In fact, I'll put one at the end of this where a family was breaking down, kind of similar things. There was an infidelity. It kind of, you know, snowballed. In that case, the woman had a career. In this case, her not having a career and homeschooling kids, you know, if she was really young and everything just kind of happened, I just can really see this is what a lot of like my mom's generation went through, where there was this set of expectations from this culture you were in. You'd be the head of the household. She'd do the thing. No one ever asked what she said. She couldn't express what she wanted. She didn't know what she wanted. You know, I don't think it's good what she's doing, but I sure understand the need to just like get out and breathe and just be like, I don't know, I'm going to go create my own problems for a while and try to remember, like, who am I? What am I here for? What am I trying to do? So I have compassion for her, even though this is a messy way to do it. Some of us, we don't know a better way to do it than to do it messy. Yeah, the stickers of the happy planning, and now she just doesn't want to plan. That is so poignant. With the homeschooling, the not working and putting stickers on things as a grown woman, I don't know, it's sad to me. It's pretty shallow. And I do agree that raising kids and educating kids is total good, noble work, and it's important. But just for her as a person, for her to just feel like, I don't even know what to do with myself. She might need to get her heart broken out there. She might need to have some experiences outside of what's been prescribed for her all her life so that she can figure out who she is. And sadly, the cost of that might be your marriage. But I don't know, like you're feeling that everything was great. Here's something that really like caught my attention. It was just, you know, as I said, I noticed like these incredibly important details came out. You know, it's like, oh, she left, you know, she's just Limerence. Oh, well, we had a threesome with the guy and we left the church right before that. And I'm like, whoa, wait a second. So you guys had a collapse of your worldview to do this stuff. And you believed we're in such a good place, it'll be great. I don't know, I'm hearing sort of a history of denial. And I understand, you know, you're a traumatized kid. We do that, but that's what's working against you here is you're not able to read a woman who's desperately unhappy. You're not able to read that the marriage is not in a good place. I love all the insight that you came up with about yourself. I think you've done an incredible job of that, and you're probably right. It's probably too much. But I love how you've really worked to have insight about what you could have done differently. And so good on you. Whatever happens after this, you having insight and taking responsibility for your pattern and how that would have been hard for her and for you and for the family and for your situation. Yeah, you know, that is noble work. That's a good job. I don't know what she's going to do. This whole thing where she's smoking, gaining a lot of weight, depressed, panic attacks, confused. It sounds like she's in a bad place and that you're still like codependent. You're trying to fix your life by trying to pretend that what's going on is Limerence, that it's just some fantasy thing. She's gone, dude. She's gone. And that doesn't mean she won't come back, but It's not, it's just like, this is, if she ever does, and I don't think it's very likely, if she ever does, it's got to be on her terms. You've got to let her have things on her terms. And how you do that is not by saying, I'm listening, I'm trying to listen to you, I'm trying to like get you to tell me how you feel. Like now is the time when you can just go, okay, well, if you want to talk, let me know. Like give her that space. And I know it's sad. I mean, this is terrible, losing a wife, and losing a wife when you have 4 kids. It's tragic, but you know what? You're in good company. I did it. Many here did it, and it turned out for the best. Like it ended up being okay. It's a really hard slog. I think the first year is hard. You're already halfway through it, Frank, and you can do that. But then you said this other thing that was shocking to me. You go, I don't think he's that great. He's a porn addict too. It's like, wait a minute. So, and then you said they're 2 addicts together. So you calling her an addict, I don't know if you meant drugs, Limerence, because she had this history of abusing prescription pills. Yeah, so I guess I didn't read this, but when you first got married, she got super depressed, started taking all these prescription pills, had an affair. Like the whole thing happened then. I don't know, I can't read her mind and she didn't write in, but if somebody does that right after getting married, I would just say, oh, hold on. It sounds like they spiritually weren't really on board with their own decision for that. And that happens. That happens to young people. It happens to traumatized people. It happens to people who are raised in a super strong, like belief system, like it sounds like you two were, where she went along with the program and then something in her was just like, stop, wait. And next thing you know, the kids. So yeah, you guys were collapsing from within for a long time. You've both been prescribed these roles. I'm the head of this. Everything's okay. And if you're copying that role as the like head of the family guy and then having financial struggles, I would imagine, and people do, lots of people have financial struggles, especially lately, but coupled with that, like I'm the head of the family, there's like a self-esteem wound right there. So then she's leaving. I don't know. I think you don't know who you are just as much as she doesn't. You guys feel young to me, and that's good. That's good. You're not like all used up and old and it's too late for you. It's not too late. Frank, I think it's time for you to work on your life. It's time for you to learn to let go, to change your pattern that you had from having an alcoholic mom of waiting and hoping and trying to be the good son. From time to time, I recommend this book, No More Mr. Nice Guy by Robert Glover. I love this book. It's really good for men who are trying to fix things by being nice so that the woman won't be mad. That's a toxic dynamic. Sometimes what you got to do is stop worrying about how other people feel, including her, because she's gone, so you're not responsible now. And you just focus on making your life good. If you have a porn addiction, I'm just going to suggest to you, Frank, you put that front and center. I'm glad you tested out CODA. I'm going to suggest you go to Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous and deal with that porn addiction. Stop caring about whether the other guy, well, actually, I would be very upset if my kids were in custody where there was pornography around. I don't know. Some people feel like that's okay or that's contained, but I have a red flag up for both of you. It is a big deal. It's a big deal. It's not a good thing to have in the house with kids, certainly. I don't think it does any favors for marriages, and because you call it an addiction, it suggests that you can't stop. So, this is a very unpopular view, but I, for one, when I wrote down and got clear what I really needed in a spouse, when I really was ready to turn my life around, that was one of the things. No pornography use. Now, for all of you out there who are like, hey, it's no big deal, I like it, no big deal, well, you do what you do, or ask yourself, how's that working for you? But I had had enough experience trying to date men who did have that problem, who are way into it, and they just would totally dissociate. They're not capable of intimacy. It's a very understated problem. A lot of people don't want to talk about, but I'm going to talk about it. I would not date somebody who did that. And so whether you end up with your wife or, maybe one day you have a new relationship, be a stand-up guy who's totally emotionally available and cancel out this hemorrhage of your emotional energy. Like you really can live without it. So Sex and Love Addicts Anonymous or SA, Sex Addicts Anonymous, those are programs where men can go. I would suggest you go to a men-only meeting and get the best sponsor in the room. So when you said you checked out CODA, or I forget the word you used, I don't know, you didn't say you worked the program. It's a 12-step program. And so you can sort of put your toe in and go, what is this thing, by going to meetings and be acquainted with ideas. But as a 12-step veteran myself, I don't put any stock in anybody who doesn't work all 12 steps with a really good sponsor. visiting a program is not it. It's weird. I got this very angry email, or not email, but a comment today from somebody who was trying to tell everybody that AA, I wouldn't recommend it to people who have been sexually abused or physically abused. And it's like, oh, like everybody who's drinking? That's very bad advice, by the way, person who said that. Very, very dangerous advice. There are a lot of people who are fragile and are finally, they're in a little bit of sobriety, and that's all they need is somebody to BS them. When you're ready to get sober from your addiction, Frank, you will go to any lengths to get help for it. And I don't think that help, the help for that kind of addiction, is available like everywhere. Not all therapists know it. I think some churches take it on, but being together with other men who are working on it themselves, there's no other substitute, and it's free. You have money problems, you got 4 kids now, you got a thing on your hands. So I'm going to ask you to take that seriously and see if you can catch yourself. You know, if you want to also go to Coda or Al-Anon too, for that, whatever you need to do. You had the alcoholic mom. You know, I did 28 years in Al-Anon. I recommend it highly to start understanding the pattern, the difference, the energy that one gets. You know, you sound like an Al-Anon to me. And wherever you find there's really strong fellowship and you resonate, and ultimately the test of whether you're in the right 12-step fellowship is, are you able to help other people there? Are you able to sponsor them? Which would come in time. So yeah, I hear you kind of minimizing her drug use. I hear you minimizing your addiction. I hear you saying they're 2 addicts together. It sounds a little bit like 3 addicts to me. So you get sober. You get sober and you be the dad your kids need right now, regardless of what she does. And you know what? When you clear up your own problems, who knows? You might be a magnet for her. You might find you don't want to be with somebody who's that lost and not dealing with themselves. Or who knows? I'm not trying to take an opinion or judge her or say that I know what's going to happen. I can't read her mind and I can't read your mind. But from what you've told me, your life is crying for your attention right now. And that's what we do as kids of alcoholics who have this tendency. We will tend to have a hard time seeing our own issues or weighing how serious they are or solving them. We get very, very interested in what are they doing. You know, what's their problem? What are they doing? And then thinking that if you could get her to change, your life would be okay. And I'm sure that feels true. And there is some truth in it, but actually you're in a soul crisis of your life and your choices are falling apart. You can't remember who you are. You've fallen into all these behaviors and you left behind your faith, which you can do if you want. You can go where you want to go. That book, No More Mr. Nice Guy, really emphasizes being friends with men. And learning to start developing your own interests in life and not have that driven by the woman in your life all the time. And, you know, I'm a woman, and there's been times I sure wish my husband would just run his whole life by what I want, but that's not actually what I want. It's not attractive. It doesn't work for him, and it doesn't work for me. I love that he has boundaries. I love that he does his own thing. So you can be like that too. So Frank, I wish you luck. You've done a very good job of working on yourself, and I thank you for writing to me. I think people are going to have a lot to say about your story, and I just want to remind everybody that Frank is a hero for all of us for having the courage to share what's really going on in his life so that we could learn from it. You could hear what I had to say about it. You can help each other with it, but please enter into the comments in a spirit of kindness and helpfulness to each other. No judgment. Don't condemn other people. You wouldn't be watching my channel if you were any better than anybody here, okay? We're all in this together. Growing up with an emotionally unstable parent probably taught you to focus on their feelings and their expectations of you at all costs. Kind of like being a hostage. And a lot of people have to work really hard to change that pattern as adults. Because if you got really good at erasing your needs and fawning all over other people and trying to guess what they want, you are in for a hard road. But people do recover. They get their awareness back, they get their feelings back, and they begin to be able to detect what is in their best interest. The hard part is expressing that, especially with maybe family of origin people who couldn't recognize a boundary from you if they smacked right into it. When sick people don't get their way, they try to hurt you. They do. And this is when setting boundaries can be the hardest. My letter today is from a woman I'll call Valerie, and she writes, "Hello, Anna. How do I tell my own mother that I don't want to be in or attend her wedding ceremony? I've been working on setting boundaries with my mom because she's caused a lot of trauma in my life. I grew up in a chaotic, inconsistent, unhealthy household. She was in a mental hospital for about a month when I was younger. I still don't know the diagnosis because she's in denial, but if I had to guess, I'd say borderline, bipolar, or narcissistic personality. All right, I'm circling. I've got the fairy pencil. I'm going to circle some things to come back to, but let's read all the way through Valerie's letter and hear what's going on, and then I'll come back. All right, she says, during my childhood, she could be extremely loving and fun, but I was always waiting for the other shoe to drop. You never knew what could set her off. She would throw fits and go into an impulsive rage. She would use anything and everything against you to hurt you. She was controlling and manipulative. All of her romantic relationships were codependent roller coasters. I began to see a pattern. She'd rush into a relationship, become unhealthily infatuated, prioritize them over anything, and then months later, she would vilify them and then take them back, and the cycle would start again. Many of her relationships involved physical abuse, and she dated a lot of addicts and recovering addicts. She eventually became a drug addict, and it spiraled over time. At the worst of it, she was homeless and unrecognizable. After failing attempts to help, I made the hard decision to completely cut her off. I went no contact for about 6 months and slowly let her back in as I saw that she became and stayed sober. She's now 4 years sober. I live several states away, so it's easy to keep my distance. We have slowly repaired our relationship, mainly over the phone. The underlying mental issues are still being ignored and remain a problem. I dread visiting because her behavior can still be manipulative, controlling, and unpredictable. I can't rely on her because I never know when she will snap and use anything and everything against me to hurt me. After getting sober, she continued rushing into relationships. She married for her 5th time after 3 months of knowing him. She took him on a trip to meet me, and then they were divorced in less than a year. I feel forcefully subjected to it all. As if I have to accept these strangers into my life just to have a relationship with my mom. It's exhausting. Every Christmas, it's a new guy, and sometimes their kids. I have nothing against these people, but it's my mom putting me through all of that that's the problem. This year, she's found a new guy and is engaged for her 6th time. This time, she's planning an entire wedding ceremony and reception. She's buying a wedding dress, renting a venue, inviting 50 people, the whole 9 yards. She asked me to be a bridesmaid. I'm to the point that I don't care what she does. I just hate being expected to have meaningful relationships with these strangers when I can't even trust how long they'll be around. I don't think I want to go to this wedding and pretend to be happy when it's only a reminder of how inconsistent and screwed up my childhood was. So now I only have a few months to decide whether or not I will suck it up and go to the wedding or break the news that I'm not going. Both options sound terrible. I don't want to hurt anyone's feelings by not going. I want my mom to be happy, just not at the expense of my sanity. For a lot of my life, I was subjected to my mom's craziness without a choice. And now that I'm an adult that can choose, I'd rather not be a part of it. Another factor I'm considering is it might cause gossip amongst my distant family members if I don't go. I don't think they know the whole story. I just want to figure out the best way to handle this without setting off a landmine because I know my mom will be upset and try to guilt trip me into going. How do I tell my mother that I don't want to attend? Okay, Valerie, I think I can help. What a hard situation. What a drag. You are so right. Bad options all around. So which bad option do you do here? All right, let's go through and I'll tell you what you said. You're working on setting boundaries with your mom. That's where you are right now in your healing. You're learning to set boundaries with somebody who can't deal with boundaries. But you do it for yourself, regardless of how she feels about it or does it. You set the boundaries that you would like to have. So she's caused a lot of trauma in your life. I get it. Chaotic, inconsistent, unhealthy household. She was in a mental hospital for about a month when you were younger. You still don't know the diagnosis because you say she's in denial or whatever, but she doesn't talk to you about it. And I think that, her getting sober is very interesting, but the thing is because she's not talking openly about the difficulty or acknowledging what happened and how crazy it's been and how it looks like the same thing. Yeah, she's not there yet, but sober, that's good that she got sober. I'm just happy for her. I know, it doesn't solve your problem, but it's kind of amazing. that anybody does that. And you said you were guessing it's either borderline, bipolar, or narcissistic personality. Can you have all those things? Maybe so. But what it reminds me of is the description of a borderline. And that can be really difficult. So we don't really need to know other people's diagnosis. I think sometimes it helps because then you're like, oh, it's a thing. And whatever it is, it does sound like a mental illness. It sounds like a serious trauma wound combined with a mental illness that's a lot more than CPTSD, that's for sure. Thing is, though, people, we do know they can't help it. So I like your attitude. You seem to actually be free of judgment of her. It really is just about like what you want to deal with. I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of you. It'd be easy earlier, and maybe you had this like early in your healing process, where it's very captivating to get into the whole story and try to convince somebody like, you told me barely anything. I totally get the picture. And I just admire your minimalism with that, your lack of indulgence in the sad story. You're dealing with it as a fact of life and a problem with boundaries and what shall you do. So I love how you're handling this. I think you're doing great. All right. So her romantic relationships are codependent roller coasters. And there's a pattern. She rushes in, infatuated, prioritizes them over everything. Then she vilifies and then takes them back, starts again. And there's often physical abuse and addicts and recovering addicts. That is so rough. That is no situation for a kid to grow up in. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. You're setting boundaries now. You're doing great. I understand. I've known people like this. And it's crazy making. And that's why I think you're a miracle. It's crazy making, it's debilitating. It just takes away your ability to think or reason. And it just sounds like she's at large. She's not doing whatever can be done about this. The thing about borderline, like bipolar, there's a medication you can take. Borderline kind of maybe, narcissism, not really. So it's so sad. It just sounds like a situation that's not likely to change. I think sometimes when people with this kind of thing, like getting older, like it reduces the sex drive and hopes of having children or anything like that, and that begins to simplify the problems and not have like myriad new problems. But maybe that it might not get any better than that, but you never know. The sobriety could have an impact at some point. I'm not trying to talk you into having hope or staying connected. I'm just musing about her, trying to get a feel for this person of like, does she deserve for you to override your own boundaries, to help this sixth wedding be happy for her? Actually, that word deserve, I never like it. Like, everybody deserves to be loved. Everybody deserves to be treated well. Most of us have to do with a lot less, and that's just how it is. We are not always in a position to fix that for other people. I would say whatever's wrong with her, no matter how much you bent over backwards to try to make her wedding happy for her, it's going to be what it is. It's going to be what it is. And so she'll have reactions if you don't go. Yes, setting a boundary for her kind of person, setting a boundary will usually set off emotional fireworks. You get to go no contact again if you would like to. That's one thing you can do. And she can do that. She can gossip about you to the extended family. Like, if they don't know you guys well enough to know what she's like, who cares what they think? They'll figure it out eventually. They'll figure it out eventually. If you want to, you can talk to them about what's going on with her. If you want some kind of a relationship with them. It sounds like they're very distant though, so it just truly doesn't matter what they think. If I had a nickel for every person from afar who has a negative opinion of me, I would be rich. It's what happens when you put yourself out there. It's what happens when you have a life. It's what happens when you survive adversity, is some people cannot deal with it and they don't care to listen or pay attention to who you are, and they don't reserve judgment. But who knows, maybe your relatives are emotionally mature enough to reserve judgment. Maybe they know her well enough, even in a short interaction, to consider the source. All right. So if they know that this is her sixth wedding and they hear you didn't go, I tend to think they understand what that means and they would not judge you. Okay. They might be really cool and they don't judge anybody, but I just think if people are going to judge you for this, who cares about them? So that's not fair to you, though, if you love them and you want them in your life. I understand. It's hard. But I would not go to the wedding just so they're not mad at you or so they don't gossip about you. That's not a good reason to go. And I'm truly open to you going either way on this one. All right. You feel forcefully subjected to it. All right. That's what it feels like when somebody can't handle boundaries and guilts you and throws emotional fireworks over your decisions. And you're saying, you know what? I don't want to get dragged into this again. You know, we've been through this before. It brings up my old stuff. Everything you told me, I don't even think it's worth telling her about. It'll fall on ears that cannot hear it, that take it personally, that are lashing out. So you have a few months to decide. You don't like being reminded of how crappy your childhood was. So all right. I tend to think that don't go, but if you did want to go, I would say, check out my daily practice so that you have a way to keep moving all the bad feelings and memories that come up. Just have a way in your hands that constantly, even at the wedding, even leading up to the wedding, every conversation you have with her, you can keep processing what comes up and keep moving it out of your head, onto the paper, down the assembly line, into the past. That's how it works. And have more neutrality to how she's acting right now. Because you know what happens over time. You've already come very far on this, I'm sure. You know, when you're in the middle of it, you're very reactive to the person's foibles. When you're a little farther down, you're just like, here we go again. Mom, yeah, okay. So you're a lot less, freaked out about it. That doesn't mean you have to like it. That doesn't mean you have to pretend it's not happening. However, there's a certain etiquette for weddings, that at weddings, you don't go, it's not the place to bring up anything or to try to dramatize that you're kind of there, but you're not taking any of this. It's not the place to do it. Like if you can't go there and basically just kind of act like it's a happy day for her, don't go. and you truly don't have to do that. I get it that it's important to her. Like in her mind, this is really it. This is really the one. And she wants you there. I get it. Like that's her reality. And it will feel to her probably like, finally she gets it right with somebody and you weren't there and it's so terrible. But you know the drill. I'm just going to tell you, you are not responsible to make this feel okay for her. You're not responsible to act any way that you don't feel. But if you don't feel good, don't go. It's not polite to go to somebody's wedding and let them see on your face and your aloofness that you're not happy. That's not cool. It's better not to go. And if you need to, cut off contact for a period of time. Give it a year. She'll be single again. It'll be over. I don't know. Does that mean? Maybe. But it just sounds like it's a very dramatic situation that's not going to resolve. And of course it affects you. And I'm really proud of the recovery that you have. And I know it's a complicated question. If only it were so simple as you just cut off people who trouble you and then you can recover. It's not really so simple, is it? It's your mom. It's your roots. It's where you come from. So it's possible sometimes to set boundaries and not have it be forever and not, that these boundaries are renegotiable by you as things go forward. Maybe you have more neutrality toward her. Maybe her continuing sobriety, she gets a little more perspective on things and has a little bit more capacity. I kind of don't think that's where it's headed, but it's worth giving it I don't know, I'll put it out there. That could, if that happens, that would be a way that the whole dynamic could change. But the way this dynamic is definitely, it is like dragging around a weight when you're trying to recover. And if you're not there yet, you sound pretty far along the way. But sometimes what recovery is saying, I'm not going to do this anymore. I just don't want to. I like how I feel when I don't participate in this stuff. And then, okay, so then if you don't go and you're going to feel guilty, again, daily practice. I'm resentful at myself because I have fear. I should have gone to the wedding. Fear I'm so mean. Fear her feelings are hurt. You get these feelings on paper. Some of them may end up becoming quite focused and serious for you. Some of them, they just go downstream like leaves. It's nothing. You don't have to know what are the important thoughts here, but you start processing the distress thoughts that come up using this tool. And if you can, getting support from other people who use this technique, who listen to you and just keep validating good, keep moving forward. And sometimes your answers come to you. With less fear and resentment, the answers come to you. And I can just really hear in your situation, I'm just support you either way. I could see either way. And I guess with that, I'll reassure you that whether you don't go or you do go, and and it's going to be hard either way, right? That's okay. It's okay that it's hard. It's okay that you do something regrettable. Like you can live with that too. It'll be okay if you regret whatever decision you make. So just pressure off. Pressure off now, Valerie. Like, it's okay. You've been through enough. You can play this by ear and see what you decide. Okay, I hope that helps. If you grew up with an abusive or neglectful parent, and especially if you were the oldest child, you may have learned to dance around and do everything in your power to make your mom not be sad, including erasing your feelings and needs so that you could pour all your energy into that parent. People who have done this often have a hard time getting perspective on it and realizing that no parent should be draining the life out of a child so that they can get their so-called needs met. The parent's needs are never met this way, of course. And worse, the child risks by not really being seen as the child they are. They don't develop their full sense of self. That can happen. My letter today is from a man I'll call Michael, and he writes, "Hi, Anna. I was raised in a fundamentalist religion, and the pressure for mothers to stay at home, dedicate everything to creating perfect, obedient, faithful children in homes that are, quote, sanctuaries, didn't combine well with my mom's own CPTSD that stemmed from her abusive father and severely disconnected mother." All right, I've got my fairy pencil. I'm going to be circling things I want to come back to. This is a longer than usual letter. I felt like it was necessary to read the whole thing, so stay with me. I'm going to circle what I want to come back to, and after we go through one time and see what's going on with Michael, I'll talk about what I see there and see if I can help. Okay. I spent most of my life thinking I was an unemotional, stable, consistent person. It's something my ex-wife said she loved about me, but I know now that I'm a super feeler. I like that. A super feeler that had those feelings literally beaten out of me. As a child, I felt things in a big way, joy, sadness, anger, you name it. But my mom, with all the pressures and trauma and pent-up desires she had, simply couldn't handle it. She'd scream, hit me, and literally lock me in my room for long enough that I'd start to panic and wonder if I'd ever get out again. And it was all done with a veneer of religiosity. Spare the rod and spoil the child. I'm proud of how far my mom came between me and my younger siblings. She always treated me differently than my siblings, always almost coddling me, even as an adult, and I'm certain there's a lot of guilt behind that. It should come as no surprise that I secretly stopped believing in anything religious around the age of 15, but as is the case with so many fundamentalist religions, the social pressure to conform is intense. So I continued to go through the motions until my 30s. That time included a mission to Brazil, a much too young marriage in which I didn't feel I could be authentic, and in which every want and need I had was steamrolled by my wife and the birth of 3 children and the loss of all but one of my friendships. My wife took my time with them personally, but didn't see her time cultivating relationships with her friends as a problem. Okay, so, all right. And then I had constant fear that I'd be found out, so I didn't stand up for anything. I don't want children, but I went ahead with it, because she did. We lived where she wanted, decorated the way she wanted, vacationed where she wanted, etc. And then my fear of being found out became a reality during a very stressful time at work when I returned to my office to find an email from my wife with the subject line, "I read your journal." Ugh. I had written in my journal that I didn't believe any of it, just in case one of my kids needed that in the future. I wanted there to be a record of what I really thought and felt. But I couldn't feel anger for that violation of privacy because all I could feel was terror that I'd be ostracized, that my wife would take our kids, and I'd be viewed as some horrible monster by the wider community. I talked it back. I said I'd keep going through the motions to keep us all together. I kept deferring everything to her, except when she'd spend money we didn't have. That's the only time we'd argue. I encouraged my wife to go back to school. I tried to get her to go back in large part because supporting a family single-handedly was taking its toll on me. I was stressed and I spent nothing on myself. It never seemed like enough for my wife. Eventually, she did go back to school, and shortly thereafter, I was diagnosed with a debilitating chronic illness. My work was accommodating and allowed me to work from home, and I admit I was unpleasant company. I felt like my future had been stolen from me, and I was bitter, but more than that, I was afraid. My wife vanished from most aspects of my life. She'd drive off first thing in the morning and leave me to work, get kids from school, help them with homework, make dinner, spend time with them, clean up, take care of our diabetic daughter, etc. And when she was home, she'd be locked away in the bedroom, quote, working on things. I was terrified that she was leaving me, that I'd be sick and alone. I wish I'd had the tools and confidence to ask her what was going on, to tell her how I felt, but I didn't. My CPTSD brain just told me to do everything I could to keep things going. But I couldn't even be upright for more than 20 minutes before symptoms and pain forced me to get back to bed. I didn't sleep at night because I was in pain and because I was the diabetes caregiver, and we couldn't afford a glucose monitor. So I'd be up checking blood sugar and giving snacks and insulin multiple times a night, and my health kept declining because of it. My wife was never home. Sometimes she'd be gone until the wee hours of the morning and wouldn't reply to texts or answer calls. I had no idea where she was, and when I'd ask, I'd be met with accusations of being controlling and told she was, quote, with a study group or working on a project. She left the religion we were in, but didn't tell me she was done. Instead, she let me continue to keep my promise to go through the motions and get the kids ready and take them to church for months, making an excuse to stay home alone before she finally confessed she was done too. My feelings for her slowly diminished until one night our daughter needed insulin. It was 1 o'clock, and my wife was who knows where. I couldn't see properly and my hands were shaking because my symptoms were so bad, and all I could do was repeatedly stab myself with the syringe while trying to draw up insulin because I was in such sorry shape. I threw the syringe across the kitchen and collapsed, sobbing, to the floor. After what felt like forever, I stood up, dried my tears, got a new syringe, and decided I just needed to not care where my wife was or what she was doing. I had to emotionally let her go to stop feeling the pain of abandonment. I managed to give my daughter insulin and went to bed, but I was still terrified of being sick and alone, so I didn't confront my wife nor end the relationship. This is getting too long again, but eventually I connected with a woman I'd sort of known in high school. She reached out because she had a lot of the same symptoms as me and had questions about one of her kids who was clearly showing signs of being diabetic. I coached her through those frightening and stressful early days of having a diabetic child, and we talked every day to figure out insulin and carb doses and ratios and to provide encouragement. As she found her way around diabetes care, I expected our conversations to become less frequent, but instead they switched to talking about all sorts of other things. It was the first time I felt like I'd been able to truly be my authentic self with anyone because there was no romantic interest. We were both married, and there was no pressure for me to pretend to be anything other than who I truly was. We talked about our childhood traumas, religion, parenthood, music, everything, and she started encouraging me to take charge of my health. She gave me confidence that I could do and be more, and I did. It was agonizingly painful, but I worked with a physical therapist and managed to get to the point that I could do almost everything I needed and wanted. I still have bad days, but this friend was a literal lifesaver. Things sometimes got flirtatious on both our parts, but we did real things back every time. I could tell she was dissatisfied in her relationship, and she confided she didn't believe in our once shared religion anymore either. I was going around. But it wasn't my place to be a romantic partner when we were both married, even though it was clear we both had feelings for each other, even if it was a trauma bond. Actually, that's not quite the right word for it, but I'll explain later. We still talked, but it was clear that things needed to cool. So after a year or so, it became less frequent and less personal. As my health improved, she felt hurt that I wasn't just all in again, and she started once again going through my personal things, my social media, trying to get into accounts, etc. And she decided it must be the fault of the woman I'd reconnected with. She confronted me, and I was embarrassed that things had gotten flirtatious, but I told her the truth. My friend had done what I expected my wife to do, see me through the most difficult time of my life. Despite crossing the flirtation line, it had never gone beyond that. My wife sent a scathing, threatening message to my friend, and we stopped talking altogether because she was terrified an unfounded accusation might make it to her husband or other family members. My wife and I spent 2 years in couples therapy, and I started seeing my own therapist. So much made sense to me, and I was relieved to find my relationship with money, the only source of our direct confrontation in our marriage, was healthy after years of being told I was controlling and tight-fisted. I learned that what I'd been seeking since I was a child was safety, but with one exception, had never felt like I could be my authentic self with anyone, so I was sabotaging myself. We worked on communication. Yeah, there it is. We worked on communication, and my wife seemed shocked the therapist focused on her behavior more than mine. I'd never been able to express wants or needs, and now we were being told to try it. It was fine in the therapist's office, but at home, if I tried it, I'd be met with accusations of not loving my wife or only wanting to be with my now absent friend, or being mean or greedy. 2 years after starting couples therapy, on our 15th anniversary, my wife messaged me from another room in the house to say she didn't want to do anything to celebrate because she thought my newfound ability to express my needs was a sign that I was just going to leave her. I went downstairs to talk to her, and after hours of tearful conversation, we decided it was time to split. She couldn't trust my intentions, and she was right about me not loving her. I was trying to love her, but I didn't anymore. There was far too much hurt. I canceled the flowers and the dinner reservation. And we started working with our therapist to figure out how to navigate this with our kids. 2 years later, splitting was the best thing I've ever done for myself. And my older 2 kids have both confided they can see how much better things are, even though changing houses every week is hard. I'm renting the basement apartment from my parents. Which I loathe, but it's affordable and nice to have a place that can expand to the full basement to provide spaces for the kids when they're here. I've started my own daily practice and have found a great deal of peace in non-religious Zen Buddhism, and I'm currently fixing up the house we shared that she's still in. To get it on the market so we can split the equity and fully separate our finances and assets. I do sometimes feel like a pushover. She's getting $2 of every $3 we collectively make. I gave her my whole tax return this year to help her cover what she owes, etc. I've come to terms with the possibility of being single in perpetuity, and I have learned to turn my fear of being alone into a love and appreciation of my solo time. I do get lonely still, but I do have my kids every other week, and that's both intense and a blessing. I set up some dating profiles a year ago, but recently deleted them both because I wasn't having any luck, just a couple of catfish and a few half-hearted conversations in all that time, and felt like I was looking for somebody so I wouldn't be lonely rather than looking for a true partner. I eventually decided to be vulnerable and wrote a post on Facebook apologizing to old friends for my absence and basically saying that I wanted and needed more in-person friendships. The response was painful. 2 people replied. 1, a realtor, wanted to get together and talk opportunities. Oh, God. The other was a woman I'd gone to high school with who had expressed romantic feelings, but who was too unstable for somebody like me if I shared her feelings. I feel like I need to rebuild my circle of friends before I'll be ready to get back into dating. But I'll be 40 this year, and I have no idea how somebody my age does that. While I'm doing better health-wise, the spoon theory of chronic illness is real. And it's hard for me to commit to things, especially if they're physical, like hiking, helping people to move, etc. And I find myself sinking back into chronic illness and despair when I have to cancel. My best friend and I are still in touch, but he lives almost 2 hours away. And his wife left him a few years ago with 2 young special needs kids, and he was diagnosed with MS shortly after. Gosh. So I find myself supporting and helping him instead of asking for support in return. Any advice you can give on where to go from here would be greatly appreciated. I feel like I made so much progress the last few years, but I feel like I'm stuck again and I don't know how to proceed from here. Thank you so much, Michael. Okay. Wow. I read the whole letter because I was so moved by your story that culminated on that kitchen floor of giving up and throwing that syringe of insulin. And oh my gosh, I'm so glad you picked yourself up again. I'm so glad you're out of that sick relationship. And I have some thoughts for you, Michael. So you give me this background that you had an abusive father and a severely disconnected mother. And I'm just going to call you on it. Is it really necessary for you to live with your parents? Because you got out of the frying pan from leaving home as a youngster and then into the fire with your wife. Now you went back into the frying pan. And I just think, I'm going to tell you like sneak preview where this is going. I see you as a person who has lost his power, and you are not able to stand up and define your own boundaries, and you're telling me you can't really remember who you are. You've been in an emotionally abusive relationship for most of your life. And if it wasn't your parents, it was your wife. And one thing that I know about that from experience is that it really separates you from other people because everything is a lie. And this, I'm guessing what religion this is. It doesn't really matter what it is. But the fact that you and basically everyone you know was terrified to be honest about where you were, that you weren't into it anymore, but the terror of being, exiled from your community, from losing all your friends, has held everybody in place to live a lie. And that is so tragic. And I'm really glad you're out. I think that sometimes healing, it's a zigzaggy line, and it looks very messy when the old thing breaks apart, and it seems like the new thing will never happen. Now, you didn't tell me what your chronic illness is, and so I don't really know, but I know that so many of us, when we're living in a lie, when we're living in emotional abuse, when we're cut off from other people and unfulfilled, when we're tolerating horrible things just so that we don't get abandoned, we are so susceptible to somaticize the emotional pain that we're going through into physical ailments. And so, I'm not saying everything's in our heads, but sometimes if all that trauma that we were carrying, it weakens our resistance to things like autoimmune diseases, heart disease, cancer, chronic pain. All of those things are highly correlated with trauma. And so sometimes when you heal the trauma, it creates enough healing in your body, enough spoons in that spoon theory, they stack up and things get a little better. And you start to be able to heal. I was so delighted to hear that with the help of one friend, you were able to get some improvement and take positive steps on your own behalf. So I just thought there was still telling language here. You masqueraded as a kid as an unemotional, stable, consistent person, but actually you were a super feeler, and I love that word. You were a super feeler and are. People remain their true selves. You have feelings in a big way: joy, sadness, anger. And you felt like you couldn't do it because of your mom. You couldn't express yourself. It was all about her, and then she punished you. And oh my gosh, what a mind F all of that is. I'm so sorry this happened to you. It's not your fault. But there's this phenomenon. So first, I want to tell you about this book, Michael. And for anybody watching, there's a book that I really admire. I think it's helped a lot of men, and it's called No More Mr. Nice Guy. It's by Robert Glover. And it's an incredibly astute, detailed book about what it's like when a man has found his coping mechanism in trying to make women happy at all costs, and how alone and emasculated and unhappy and stuck and sick and sad and angry that can lead a person to be. So it's a really powerful book. I really encourage you to check it out. And it was recommended to me by a young man in my life who thought that I would want to know about this for men. And I bring it up often. No More Mr. Nice Guy. And there's this concept that the author has there of a symptom of being a nice guy in a bad way is that you're monogamous with your mother. So this thing where you're proud of her that she was nicer to other people after you, but then she coddled you. She coddled you, and she had guilt, and you stopped believing, and you pretended you were religious for her sake. It's like the two of you had this, maybe well-motivated, but very sick dynamic of abuse and not being yourself, and then you got pushed into a much too young marriage, and you had kids for your wife. You kind of went right to the next woman who ran your life and who ran you with anger every time you deviated from her wishes. We're going to have kids. You didn't want them, but she did. You had to live where she wanted, decorate the way she wanted, vacation where she wanted. And at a certain point, I will sort of respond to a person. You're 40 years old, okay? So you're old enough now to stand up to somebody. I totally understand trauma wounds, that you're working on it, you're trying. But I'm just saying, it is in your power right now to never again let somebody dominate your life like that. We all compromise with partners about things, but that means two ways, right? And having kids is way too big a thing to do when you didn't want to do it. And that is something that people need to be on the same page. So you kind of got coerced into marriage, coerced into being some person you're not. And then she just sets about this emotional abuse. I read your journal. She busts you no longer being religious. Turns out she's not religious and lying to you. She's just lays all this stuff on you about your female friend, your emotional affair, basically, which, you know, obviously is wrong in marriage, but also so understandable in the situation you were in that you would have a friend. I'm glad you had a friend, honestly. It's amazing that you didn't cross the line with it. But what's interesting is how angry and scared it made her when her staying out till the wee hours, you'd have to really like run a truck over me to convince me she wasn't having an affair. Like the full-on affair, not just the emotional kind. It sounds like there were lies and lies upon lies under the carpet at your house. I'm so glad you're out of that house. So yeah, she got very distant when she started working. She started her own thing. And I know if she wrote me, I would have sympathy too. She got pushed into this life too, that she didn't have a chance to really form for herself. She was doing the script and she was pretty angry about it and she took it out on you. And I'm sorry about how sick your daughter has been and how hard that is and not being able to afford the glucose monitor. My gosh. I'm so sorry having to get up all night with your chronic disease and being on your own. And I just empathize a lot because I've been on the kitchen floor, so to speak. I've been in the bathtub in the middle of the night and the crying and the, being so alone with something overwhelmingly hard to deal with and scary and life-threatening. And some of us come through the other side and we have a strength and a wisdom to give. But one of the sort of bargains that we have to make if this is going to become strength is we must never again accept abuse. We have to draw the line on no longer lying about who we are. Let the chips fall where they may. And it sounds like you have. You're practicing your own spirituality now. You're pursuing healing. That's right. You've been out for 2 years. And 2 years is a good, healthy time to be working on yourself and getting life together. But here's what I notice, Michael. Here's what I notice. You're living with your parents. You're giving your wife most of the money. You gave her your tax return. I'm just wondering, why are you guys not legally separated so that your money is yours and her money is hers with a legal agreement for how the kids are to be supported and cared for? I'm wondering about that because as a divorced parent myself, I know how vulnerable a parent is when there's not a clear divorce agreement in place and custody agreement in place. Like anything can happen. And this thing where you just kind of pour your life out for the sake of some angry woman, I just can't help but notice that you're doing it again. And you don't like living with your parents, and sure, it's affordable, but is it not time to stand up on your feet? Many, many, many divorced dads with kids have, worked, they have an apartment. It may not be the nicest apartment, but they have an apartment and there's a decency and a goodness to the energy, like a wholesomeness to the energy, because nobody is controlling you or running your life. You are free to blossom and evolve as the person you truly are, the beautiful person that you are without the abuse. So it's bumpy. And I know there's transition times, but may I encourage you to get your own place, not under the umbrella of any of the people who have ever abused you. Getting abused in the past, it really is a miracle how we figure out how to survive anyway. And I am not an advocate that everybody has to cut off contact, but I do think that remaining dependent, entangled, and also hemorrhaging our resources unfairly, more than is necessary to the abuser, is a symptom. It's a symptom. And it's amazing what you can do when you take all of your energy, all that energy you have, that money is energy, right? Your physical powers are energy to heal your own body, to heal your own life, to heal your own family, which is you and your children. And yeah, they have a relationship with their mom, but you have a family, and this is where your energy is needed. And so I hear this, there's this weird, I can just see it. It happens over and over again in your story where you feel like you have to do everything, that you're not entitled to just be an equal among equals, and hold your ground and have your money and say no and let women get angry if they must, right? It's actually okay. It's actually okay because you're free. You're free now. You're free to be yourself. So I hear there's money problems here. You say your relationship to money is sound. And I'm glad to hear that, because always after a divorce with kids, like that's so important for both parents to have their money act together. So you have that together. I'm having trouble understanding why you're hemorrhaging money and giving it away. So I encourage you to deal with that. So friends, I think that if I were to go by my own experience, when you've been in an emotionally abusive relationship, you live a lie. You're always presenting a happy face to people. You're not forming real friendships. Like real friendships, it's not that you sit around and you had said trauma bond. And I just wanted to say, I know what you mean, that you both have been through trauma. You're going through trauma. You bonded over it. There's that. I think it needs a special word. Technically, trauma bond is intermittent reinforcement, where somebody blows hot and cold and you end up like totally hooked on them. And that's a trauma bond relationship. So that's for another video sometime. But I know what you mean. You know, you bonded with this woman over trauma. I don't know, it sounds like it was actually a great relationship. A great relationship begins with a great friendship of mutual support. And so who knows if she ever is available, you know, that could be there. You know, somebody did show you real love there, and I'm glad. But the friends thing is not going so well. And I think that you've been living a lie so long, you can't really, you know, I call it vibrating. Yeah, like somebody who really likes comedy, you know, when they do comedy, they vibrate. They're just like vibrant. They're happy, right? They're happy. And other people who like comedy, you find each other and you enjoy things together. You've been so suppressed in anything that you actually like that nobody can find you. And I think with your illness too, that tends to dim your light. You know, I call it a cab light. It's the light on that I'm available. I can be a friend. I can be a partner. I'm open for business, you know, but your light is dim right now because well, I think a lot of your energy is going into your ex. So sever that tie, you know, just have a legal relationship that's cooperative for the sake of the kids. Save that energy to let that light in you brighten so that your future friends and perhaps a partner can see you, so that when they talk to you, they recognize common interests, so that you're not just instantly going into this fake version of yourself with them. Yes, it will be messy at first, and that is okay. And some people will fall by the wayside. You'll lose old friends that you thought were there for you. You'll get new friends. Some of the new friends turn out to be shallow. Like, you know, we're not the greatest judges of character just right out of the gate when we're healing trauma, but it comes quickly. The two things that I really encourage you and anybody healing from, you know, a great big traumatic abusive relationship is to find support with like-minded people who are also healing. That could be a 12-step group. It could be a therapy group, but you know, when money is an object, I really endorse getting together in groups that are free, that are mutual support for people. Yes, there's no professional present, but 12-step groups are very well set up to sort of provide a container for people to give each other mutual support. And everybody, you know, you'll find people who will go, oh yeah, you know, somebody was terrible to me there, or they tried to pick me up. Of course, people are people, but you get to have boundaries now, and you can freely associate with people without making them your savior, your higher power, you know, to hold them on a pedestal like they should know how to act. Like, people who have troubles can help each other, but what you can expect from people who have troubles is sometimes they're troublesome, okay? It's okay. But 12-step groups, it's that community of love and healing that is there. And it's not just that. People who come just for social reasons don't tend to last very long or contribute much. It's you go in and you work a 12-step program. And I don't know what it is with you, maybe Codependence Anonymous, something like that. There's ACA, Adult Children of Alcoholics and Other Dysfunctional Families. That is a program that a lot of people really enjoy. That program acknowledges PTSD in people from abuse and neglect. So just saying, there are places out there you could go to. You'd also be tremendously welcome in my membership program. In my membership program, we have courses, we have webinars. You get all this free. You get access to this stuff that normally costs money. You get the year membership, and then you have access to all the courses, all the webinars I do, and you have access to group coaching calls I do every 2 weeks and free daily practice calls. And I teach this thing called the daily practice. If you do nothing, if you don't want to spend a penny, come take this free course I teach, because it helps you to see and name the feelings, the negative feelings that are coming up, and just let them go downstream. They just move on downstream, not pushing them down, not pretending they don't exist, not making them a problem in any way, but just naming them. There it is. And then it's a spiritual, prayerful act of releasing them or asking them to be removed, to get a little freedom to just experience reality within yourself for a little while before all the fearful, resentful thoughts start raining down again. They always do because we're human. So it's a little way to just have some hygiene in your mind in the dark corners of those thoughts, everything's bad, I'll never make it, I can't have friends. That stuff gets on paper, get a little space from it. And then you have a little new idea. You find a power growing within to take action. You get an inspired sense of, what makes sense for you to do. Where are your friends? Then when you have less of that going on, the bag of cats, as I call it, when you do make a friend, then hanging out with you is cheerful, relaxing, uplifting, meaningful, and not just, one stressed person getting together with another stressed person and relating about the hardship of it all. That counts, but I know what you're looking for is something to carry you to the next level, and that is what friends can do. We do it for them, they do it for us. So I really encourage you, community and tools that work for you.